Hey folks, everything new under the sun. This is one of the slides from my keynote presentation, Timeline of the Return of the Lord. And it presents to you what I think is kind of a map or a track of um, the direction we're headed in terms of government control, violence, the love of many waxes cold, Matthew 24, and eventually to the New World Order, the market, the beast system, the world government, economic collapse. And I believe it started with the pandemic. I could be wrong, but I believe it did. And this is the slide which I think lines up with the biblical timeline of events as I understand it, and it relates to a 7-year period which is going to be kicked off by an antichrist figure, a world leader, which is going to who is going to come into power at a time when we're all desperate, when there's economic collapse, we have no food, we have no shelter, we have no safety. Possibly the world has just gone through effectively World War III, and I think that's what we're in right now. And the world is calling out for a leader. The world, there's no peace. There's been bombs flying. There's been just war and death and all sorts of troubles. And is that what's happening in the world right now? I think so. Are people starting to call for peace? They absolutely are. They just want peace and security, peace and safety. And they will get so desperate, I think, at a point where they will call on a world leader and say, please, we need a savior. We need someone to take us out of this. And so I think this timeline applies in many ways. The COVID pandemic created basically an economic depression of sorts, and there was ups and downs there. Just after the pandemic, everybody was released from their houses. Everybody started spending money like crazy. But now there's going to be, now we've all exhausted the money that we had, and now there's going to be a time of a slowing down time. And I think we see that in terms of the economy. Economic collapse in World War III is what I showed there. Job losses are continuing. And in fact, this is what the central bank, the Federal Reserve, says they wanted to see. Their whole purpose was to see job losses. Why? Well, because that lowers inflation, right? The fewer people that have money and less money will be willing to spend less on products and services. The more people that are willing to spend less means that the price of goods and services will come down as supply and demand dictates the prices, right? There'll be less demand for products. That means the prices will come down. That means inflation will come down. So that's the federal government and the central banks. That's their purpose, to create job losses, and they've said that because that's going to lower inflation. But again, what drives this famine, starvation? Well, I think indeed we get to World War III, we get to economic collapse, we get to a situation where supply lines are cut or severely diminished, and we head into this time of famine. And this doesn't sound like the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse writing. And indeed, I think this is the run up to and the setting of the stage towards global government. And of course, towards the setup of the 7-year period, which is described by this particular chart. Could it start sometime in 2024? I think it could. There's a lot of interesting factors happening right now, and things are only getting worse. Let's take a look at this. This is the economiccollapseblog.com. U.S. banks are sitting on a $650 billion in unrealized losses, and that means disaster is just a bank run away. They're teetering on the edge. If there was a bank run and people tried to get out cash, there is not enough cash in the system for people to have. So it's really literally teetering on the edge. If people decided to pull their money out and buy hard assets, the banks would collapse. There is not enough money in there for that. And so this is a real and present danger. Our economy runs on credit, it says, and our banks are beating the heart of that system. Without healthy banks, how would Americans buy homes, purchase vehicles, or get credit cards? The way the system is currently constructed, it is absolutely imperative for our banks to function. If they don't, how are you going to pay your mortgage? Everything's digital now, right? If banks start falling, if banks start delaying payments, that's going to it's basically like throwing a wrench into the gears of the complete economic system. They are sitting on hundreds of billions of unrealized losses, and the primary reason why those losses have become so large, um, it says, is because we have witnessed a historic bond market crash over the past several years. Okay, so that's one thing. Americans are drowning in debt. Americans spent basically all their savings during the pandemic when they weren't working, when the working poor, if you will, couldn't work because of lockdowns, shutdowns. They spent all the savings that they had. They went into debt. They started using credit to pay for this, and that hasn't been built up again. Uh, Unfortunately, for decades, Americans have been extremely irresponsible with their finances, it says. As a result, credit card debt is at an all-time high. Auto loan debt is at an all-time high. Mortgage debt is at an all-time high. Look at the price of houses. And people are still buying and selling houses where those houses cost $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. But they do it because they think it's normal. And the banks allow it because the banks think it's normal. What happens when interest rates increase too much? What happens when all these people go under because they can't afford their houses anymore, and they just default on their loans, and banks start defaulting. Uh, it goes anyways. It goes on. Americans are absolutely drowning in debt. We don't have any savings anymore. We don't have hard assets. The banks own everything in a sort of a way. But what are the banks going to do when they may own everything? But what are they going to do with a house that's rotting and no one can pay for it? Nothing. They're going to collapse as well. So I put to you this. Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38. Does it describe, is there any reference to there being maybe economic troubles at the time that those things occur? And I will submit to you that there is indication of economic trouble, and that could be what we're heading towards. This is Isaiah 17. Behold, the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city. It shall be a ruinous heap. This has never happened in history. This is a yet future event. Many believe that this is going to coming down the pipe very quickly as Israel's getting close. Israel bombs the outskirts of Damascus because there's a stronghold of Iranian military forces, and they're transferring a lot of weapons and such through those airports. But they haven't bombed or taken out Damascus in terms of the city. Does Isaiah 17 speak of economic trouble? Well, look at this. The fortress of Ephraim, the fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, the kingdom from Damascus, the remnant of Syria. So the government of Syria is taken out, and it shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. In that day it shall come to pass, the glory of Jacob shall be made thin. The fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. I submit to you, what that means is that there's economic trouble. There's a pinch. There is a strain on the system, and there's not a lot of resources. Maybe trade is cut off, and quite literally, flesh shall wax lean. They're not as rich as they were anymore because the world is in economic trouble, economic collapse. Now, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, Israel still has a lot of spoil, a lot of cattle and goods, a lot of riches, but they will be pinched and they will be in economic trouble. So I submit to you again that this comes at a time during some sort of economic trouble. Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog Magog and these countries, Persia, which is Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, countries of the north, Turkey, marching on Israel due to a hook in the jaw, which I think that hook in the jaw is the destruction of Damascus. There's military agreements. If they take out Damascus, Russia is huge in Syria. That will be the hook in the jaw, which drags them down into Israel and against Israel. After many days thou shalt be visited in the latter days. So this is again a yet future event. In the latter days thou shalt come into the land that has been brought back by the sword, and is gathered out of many people, many nations, against the mountains of Israel, which has always been waste, but it is brought forth out of the nations. This is the diaspora, the Jews coming back into the land. Again, yet future event. This war of Gog Magog has not happened. There may be a dual fulfillment, and I believe there is because it speaks of it in Revelation. at the end of the millennial reign of Christ, but I think there's a near fulfillment as well. Note that Ezekiel 38 and 39 seem to describe the same war of Gog and Magog. Why is it back to back, chapter to chapter, seemingly speaking of the same thing? Well, again, dual fulfillment. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. Now, is Israel at peace and with unwalled villages? No. Again, this is a yet future event. Maybe, when some leader comes in and declares peace. But I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil, to take prey. So these nations are coming specifically to take a spoil, not to destroy Israel because Israel has done something necessarily in Damascus. Ultimately, they're coming in to take something from what Israel has. Certainly, they want Israel's oil and gas. Israel is sitting on the Leviathan oil and gas field, massive reserves. Note that Israel has the lowest water resource in the world, the Dead Sea. And wouldn't it be interesting if Israel's oil and gas fields effectively accessed basically the lowest area of oil and gas in the world, to where all the oil and gas, well, not the gas, I guess, but the oil drained, if you will, to the lowest point underneath Israel, and basically siphoned off all the reserves of Iran, of Saudi Arabia. Wouldn't it be interesting if that was found out and there was a connection between those oil fields and it all drained into Israel, and Israel had all of that? Wouldn't it be interesting if that was the geology? Would that be a hook in the jaw? So it says, to take a spoil, to take prey, to turn thy hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited. Again, they are now inhabited, but they couldn't say that before 1948. And upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods and dwell in the midst of the land. So, what does the United States and the Western world say against this invasion of Israel? Sheba and Dedan and merchants of Tarshish with all the young lions. So this, people suggest, is the young lions refers to maybe United States, the offspring of Britain. Art thou come to take a spoil, to gather thy company, to take a prey, to take away gold and silver, to take away cattle and goods? So again, it describes a time when possibly there's economic collapse, economic trouble, maybe just after effectively World War III. And they're coming to take gold and silver. They're coming to take food and a great spoil from Israel that they think is not fair, I guess. And again, to me, it speaks of a time when they're desperate, when they don't have enough food and gold and silver, money. And so I read into that Ezekiel 38 and 39, Isaiah 17, economic trouble. And is that what we're in right now? I think so. So you let me know what you think. Do you see that in those verses, or am I simply reading into it something that's not there? But I think, you look at the forms from the Apocalypse in Revelation chapter 6, and they describe a time of economic collapse and great war. And I think we're marching headlong into that. So be prepared. Ultimately, you're going to need faith in Jesus Christ, and the Lord will provide for you. But he also gave you a brain. Get some food stored up. Get some, maybe some precious metals. Maybe some things to barter. Buy some shovels and some rakes, so that when times are tough, you can work with your hand and maybe barter, for goods and services. Provide work to someone. Provide some skilled labor of some sort that maybe your neighbors don't have, and that way you can still work and feed yourself during these hard times, which I think are coming upon us all. I'll leave there, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.